Tonight, we drift into a quieter world, a world where ancient forests whisper secrets, and every word is a gentle bridge to peace. Whether it is a lesson of the heart, a hero's journey, or a dream from long ago, you don't need to follow every detail. You don't need to hold on to any thought. Just listen. Let the rhythm of the tale wash over you. And as your body grows heavy, let the magic of these stories carry you away into a deep and effortless sleep. The Little Mermaid, far out in the ocean, where the water is as blue as the prettiest cornflower and as clear as crystal. It is very, very deep. So deep indeed that no cable could fathom it. Many church steeples, piled one upon another, would not reach from the ground beneath to the surface of the water above. There dwell the Sea King and his subjects. We must not imagine that there is nothing at the bottom of the sea but bare, yellow sand. No, indeed. The most singular flowers and plants grow there, the leaves and stems of which are so pliant that the slightest agitation of the water causes them to stir as if they had life. Fishes, both large and small, glide between the branches as birds fly among the trees here upon land. In the deepest spot of all stands the castle of the Sea King. Its walls are built of coral, and the long Gothic windows are of the clearest amber. The roof is formed of shells that open and close as the water flows over them. Their appearance is very beautiful, for in each lies a glittering pearl which would be fit for the diadem of a queen. The Sea King had been a widower for many years, and his aged mother kept house for him. She was a very wise woman, and exceedingly proud of her high birth. On that account, she wore 12 oysters on her tail, while others, also of high rank, were only allowed to wear 6. She was, however, deserving of very great praise, especially for her care of the little sea princesses, her granddaughters. They were 6 beautiful children, but the youngest was the prettiest of them all. Her skin was as clear and delicate as a rose leaf, and her eyes as blue as the deepest sea. But like all the others, she had no feet, and her body ended in a fish's tail. All day long, they played in the great halls of the castle, or among the living flowers that grew out of the walls. The large amber windows were open, and the fish swam in just as the swallows fly into our houses when we open the windows, excepting that the fishes swam up to the princesses, ate out of their hands, and allowed themselves to be stroked. Outside the castle, there was a beautiful garden in which grew bright red and dark blue flowers and blossoms like flames of fire. The fruit glittered like gold, and the leaves and stems waved to and fro continually. The earth itself was the finest sand, but blue as the flame of burning sulfur. Over everything lay a peculiar blue radiance, as if it were surrounded by the air from above, through which the blue sky shone instead of the dark depths of the sea. In calm weather, the sun could be seen looking like a purple flower, with the light streaming from the calyx. Each of the young princesses had a little plot of ground in the garden where she might dig and plant as she pleased. One arranged her flower bed into the form of a whale. Another thought it better to make hers like the figure of a little mermaid. But that of the youngest was round like the sun and contained flowers as red as his rays at sunset. She was a strange child, quiet and thoughtful. And while her sisters would be delighted with the wonderful things which they obtained from the wrecks of vessels, she cared for nothing but her pretty red flowers, like the sun, excepting a beautiful marble statue. It was the representation of a handsome boy carved out of pure white stone, which had fallen to the bottom of the sea from a wreck. She planted by the statue a rose-colored, weeping willow. It grew splendidly, and very soon hung its fresh branches over the statue almost down to the blue sands. The shadow had a violet tint and waved to and fro like the branches. It seemed as if the crown of the tree and the root were at play and trying to kiss each other. Nothing gave her so much pleasure as to hear about the world above the sea. She made her old grandmother tell her all she knew of the ships and of the towns, the people and the animals. To her, it seemed most wonderful and beautiful to hear that the flowers of the land should have fragrance, and not those below the sea, that the trees of the forest should be green, and that the fishes among the trees could sing so sweetly that it was quite a pleasure to hear them. Her grandmother called the little birds fishes, or she would not have understood her, for she had never seen birds. "When you have reached your 15th year," said the grandmother, "you will have permission to rise up out of the sea to sit on the rocks in the moonlight while the great ships are sailing by. And then you will see both forests and towns. In the following year, one of the sisters would be 15, but as each was a year younger than the other, the youngest would have to wait 5 years before her turn came to rise up from the bottom of the ocean and see the earth as we do. However, each promised to tell the others what she saw on her first visit and what she thought the most beautiful. For their grandmother could not tell them enough. There were so many things on which they wanted information. None of them longed so much for her turn to come as the youngest she, who had the longest time to wait, and who was so quiet and thoughtful. Many nights she stood by the open window, looking up through the dark blue water and watching the fish as they splashed about with their fins and tails. She could see the moon and stars shining faintly, but through the water they looked larger than they do to our eyes. When something like a black cloud passed between her and them, she knew that it was either a whale swimming over her head or a ship full of human beings who never imagined that a pretty little mermaid was standing beneath them, holding out her white hands towards the keel of their ship. As soon as the eldest was 15, she was allowed to rise to the surface of the ocean. When she came back, she had hundreds of things to talk about. But the most beautiful, she said, was to lie in the moonlight on a sandbank in the quiet sea near the coast, and to gaze on a large town nearby where the lights were twinkling like hundreds of stars, to listen to the sounds of the music, the noise of carriages, and the voices of human beings, and then to hear the merry bells peal out from the church steeples. And because she could not go near to all those wonderful things, she longed for them more than ever. Oh, did not the youngest sister listen eagerly to all these descriptions? And afterwards, when she stood at the open window, looking up through the dark blue water, she thought of the great city with all its bustle and noise, and even fancied she could hear the sound of the church bells down in the depths of the sea. In another year, the second sister received permission to rise to the surface of the water and to swim about where she pleased. She rose just as the sun was setting, and this, she said, was the most beautiful sight of all. The whole sky looked like gold, while violet and rose-colored clouds, which she could not describe, floated over her. And still more rapidly than the clouds flew a large flock of wild swans towards the setting sun, looking like a long white veil across the sea. She also swam towards the sun, but it sunk into the waves, and the rosy tints faded from the clouds and from the sea. The third sister's turn followed. She was the boldest of them all, and she swam up a broad river that emptied itself into the sea. On the banks, she saw green hills covered with beautiful vines. Palaces and castles peeped out from amid the proud trees of the forest. She heard the birds singing, and the rays of the sun were so powerful that she was obliged often to dive down under the water to cool her burning face. In a narrow creek, she found a whole troop of little human children quite naked and sporting about in the water. She wanted to play with them, but they fled in a great fright. And then a little black animal came to the water. It was a dog, but she did not know that, for she had never before seen one. This animal barked at her so terribly that she became frightened and rushed back to the open sea. But she said she should never forget the beautiful forest, the green hills, and the pretty little children who could swim in the water, although they had not fishes' tails. The fourth sister was more timid. She remained in the midst of the sea, but she said it was quite as beautiful there as nearer the land. She could see for so many miles around her, and the sky above looked like a bell of glass. She had seen the ships, but at such a great distance that they looked like seagulls. The dolphins sported in the waves, and the great whales spouted water from their nostrils till it seemed as if 100 fountains were playing in every direction. The fifth sister's birthday occurred in the winter. So when her turn came, she saw what the others had not seen the first time they went up. The sea looked quite green, and large icebergs were floating about each like a pearl, she said, but larger and loftier than the churches built by men. They were of the most singular shapes and glittered like diamonds. She had seated herself upon one of the largest and let the wind play with her long hair, and she remarked that all the ships sailed by rapidly and steered as far away as they could from the iceberg, as if they were afraid of it. Towards evening, as the sun went down, dark clouds covered the sky, the thunder rolled, and the lightning flashed, and the red light glowed on the icebergs as they rocked and tossed on the heaving sea. On all the ships, the sails were reefed with fear and trembling, while she sat calmly on the floating iceberg, watching the blue lightning as it darted its forked flashes into the sea. When first the sisters had permission to rise to the surface, they were each delighted with the new and beautiful sights they saw. But now, as grown-up girls, they could go when they pleased, and they had become indifferent about it. They wished themselves back again in the water, and after a month had passed, they said it was much more beautiful down below and pleasanter to be at home. Yet often in the evening hours, the 5 sisters would twine their arms round each other and rise to the surface in a row. They had more beautiful voices than any human being could have, and before the approach of a storm, and when they expected a ship would be lost, they swam before the vessel and sang sweetly of the delights to be found in the depths of the sea, and begging the sailors not to fear if they sank to the bottom. But the sailors could not understand the song. They took it for the howling of the storm, and these things were never to be beautiful for them. For if the ship sank, the men were drowned, and their dead bodies alone reached the palace of the Sea King. When the sisters rose arm in arm through the water in this way, their youngest sister would stand quite alone, looking after them, ready to cry, only that the mermaids have no tears, and therefore they suffer more. "Oh, were I but 15 years old," said she, "I know that I shall love the world up there, and all the people who live in it." At last she reached her 15th year. "Well, now you are grown up," said the old dowager, her grandmother, "so you must let me adorn you like your other sisters." And she placed a wreath of white lilies in her hair, and every flower leaf was half a pearl. Then the old lady ordered 8 great oysters to attach themselves to the tail of the princess to show her high rank. "But they hurt me so," said the little mermaid. "Pride must suffer pain," replied the old lady. Oh, how gladly she would have shaken off all this grandeur and laid aside the heavy wreath. The red flowers in her own garden would have suited her much better, but she could not help herself, so she said, "Farewell," and rose as lightly as a bubble to the surface of the water. The sun had just set as she raised her head above the waves, but the clouds were tinted with crimson and gold, and through the glimmering twilight beamed the evening star in all its beauty. The sea was calm, and the air mild and fresh. A large ship with 3 masts lay becalmed on the water, with only 1 sail set. For not a breeze stiffed, and the sailors sat idle on deck or amongst the rigging. There was music and song on board, and as darkness came on, 100 colored lanterns were lighted, as if the flags of all nations waved in the air. The little mermaid swam close to the cabin windows, and now and then, as the waves lifted her up, she could look in through clear glass window panes and see a number of well-dressed people within. Among them was a young prince, the most beautiful of all, with large black eyes. He was 16 years of age, and his birthday was being kept with much rejoicing. The sailors were dancing on deck, but when the prince came out of the cabin, more than 100 rockets rose in the air, making it as bright as day. The little mermaid was so startled that she dived underwater, and when she again stretched out her head, it appeared as if stars of heaven were falling around her. She had never seen such fireworks before. Great suns spurted fire about splendid fireflies, flew into the blue air, and everything was reflected in the clear, calm sea beneath. The ship itself was so brightly illuminated that all the people and even the smallest rope could be distinctly and plainly seen. And how handsome the young prince looked as he pressed the hands of all present and smiled at them, while the music resounded through the clear night air. It was very late, yet the little mermaid could not take her eyes from the ship or from the beautiful prince. The colored lanterns had been extinguished. No more. Rockets rose in the air, and the cannon had ceased firing. But the sea became restless, and a moaning, grumbling sound could be heard beneath the waves. Still the little mermaid remained by the cabin window, rocking up and down on the water, which enabled her to look in. After a while, the sails were quickly unfurled, and the noble ship continued her passage. But soon, the waves rose higher. Heavy clouds darkened the sky, and lightning appeared in the distance. A dreadful storm was approaching. Once more, the sails were reefed, and the great ship pursued her flying course over the raging sea. The waves rose mountains high, as if they would have overtopped the mast. But the ship dived like a swan between them, and then rose again on their lofty, foaming crests. To the little mermaid, this appeared pleasant sport. Not so to the sailors. At length, the ship groaned and creaked. The thick planks gave way under the lashing of the sea as it broke over the deck. The mainmast snapped asunder like a reed. The ship lay over on her side, and the water rushed in. The little mermaid now perceived that the crew were in danger. Even she herself was obliged to be careful to avoid the beams and planks of the wreck, which lay scattered on the water. At one moment, it was so pitch dark that she could not see a single object, but a flash of lightning revealed the whole scene. She could see everyone who had been on board, excepting the prince. When the ship parted, she had seen him sink into the deep waves, and she was glad, for she thought he would now be with her. And then she remembered that human beings could not live in the water, so that when he got down to her father's palace, he would be quite dead. But he must not die. So she swam about among the beams and planks which strewed the surface of the sea, forgetting that they could crush her to pieces. Then she dived deeply under the dark waters, rising and falling with the waves, till at length she managed to reach the young prince, who was fast losing the power of swimming in that stormy sea. His limbs were failing him. His beautiful eyes were closed, and he would have died had not the little mermaid come to his assistance. She held his head above the water and let the waves drift them where they would. In the morning, the storm had ceased, but of the ship not a single fragment could be seen. The sun rose up red and glowing from the water, and its beams brought back the hue of health to the prince's cheeks, but his eyes remained closed. The mermaid kissed his high, smooth forehead and stroked back his wet hair. He seemed to her like the marble statue in her little garden, and she kissed him again and wished that he might live. Presently, they came in sight of land. She saw lofty blue mountains on which the white snow rested, as if a flock of swans were lying upon them. Near the coast were beautiful green forests, and close by stood a large building. Whether a church or a convent, she could not tell. Orange and citron trees grew in the garden, and before the door stood lofty palms. The sea here formed a little bay in which the water was quite still, but very deep. So she swam with the handsome prince to the beach, which was covered with fine white sand. And there she laid him in the warm sunshine, taking care to raise his head higher than his body. Then bells sounded in the large white building, and a number of young girls came into the garden. The little mermaid swam out farther from the shore and placed herself between some high rocks that rose out of the water. Then she covered her head and neck with the foam of the sea, so that her little face might not be seen, and watched to see what would become of the poor prince. She did not wait long before she saw a young girl approach the spot where he lay. She seemed frightened at first, but only for a moment. Then she fetched a number of people, and the mermaid saw that the prince came to life again and smiled upon those who stood round him. But to her he sent no smile. He knew not that she had saved him. This made her very unhappy, and when he was led away into the great building, she dived down sorrowfully into the water and returned to her father's castle. She had always been silent and thoughtful, and now she was more so than ever. Her sisters asked her what she had seen during her first visit to the surface of the water, but she would tell them nothing. Many an evening and morning did she rise to the place where she had left the prince. She saw the fruits in the garden ripen till they were gathered, the snow on the tops of the mountains melt away. But she never saw the prince, and therefore she returned home always more sorrowful than before. It was her only comfort to sit in her own little garden and fling her arm round the beautiful marble statue, which was like the prince. But she gave up tending her flowers, and they grew in wild confusion over the paths, twining their long leaves and stems round the branches of the trees, so that the whole place became dark and gloomy. At length, she could bear it no longer, and told one of her sisters, all about it. Then the others heard the secret, and very soon it became known to two mermaids whose intimate friend happened to know who the prince was. She had also seen the festival on board ship, and she told them where the prince came from and where his palace stood. "Come, little sister," said the other princesses. Then they entwined their arms and rose up in a long row to the surface of the water, close by the spot where they knew the prince's palace stood. It was built of bright yellow shining stone, with long flights of marble steps, one of which reached quite down to the sea. Splendid, gilded cupolas rose over the roof, and between the pillars that surrounded the whole building stood lifelike statues of marble. Through the clear crystal of the lofty windows could be seen noble rooms with costly silk curtains and hangings of tapestry, while the walls were covered with beautiful paintings, which were a pleasure to look at. In the center of the largest saloon, a fountain threw its sparkling jets high up into the glass cupola of the ceiling, through which the sun shone down upon the water and upon the beautiful plants growing round the basin of the fountain. Now that she knew where he lived, she spent many an evening and many a night on the water near the palace. She would swim much nearer the shore than any of the others ventured to do. Indeed, once she went quite up the narrow channel under the marble balcony, which threw a broad shadow on the water. Here she would sit and watch the young prince, who thought himself quite alone in the bright moonlight. She saw him many times of an evening, sailing in a pleasant boat, with music playing and flags waving. She peeped out from among the green rushes, and if the wind caught her long silvery white veil, those who saw it believed it to be a swan spreading out its wings. On many a night, too, when the fishermen with their torches were out at sea, she heard them relate so many good things about the doings of the young prince that she was glad she had saved his life when he had been tossed about half dead on the waves, and she remembered that his head had rested on her bosom, and how heartily she had kissed him. But he knew nothing of all this, and could not even dream of her. She grew more and more fond of human beings, and wished more and more to be able to wander about with those whose world seemed to be so much larger than her own. They could fly over the sea in ships and mount the high hills which were far above the clouds, and the lands they possessed, their woods and their fields, stretched far away beyond the reach of her sight. There was so much that she wished to know, and her sisters were unable to answer all her questions. Then she applied to her old grandmother, who knew all about the upper world, which she very rightly called the lands above the sea. If human beings are not drowned asked the little mermaid. Can they live forever? Do they never die as we do here in the sea? Yes, replied the old lady. They must also die, and their term of life is even shorter than ours. We sometimes live to 300 years, but when we cease to exist here, we only become the foam on the surface of the water, and we have not even a grave down here of those we love. We have not immortal souls. We shall never live again. But like the green seaweed, when once it has been cut off, we can never flourish more. Human beings, on the contrary, have a soul which lives forever, lives after the body has been turned to dust. It rises up through the clear, pure air beyond the glittering stars. As we rise out of the water and behold all the land of the earth, so do they rise to unknown and glorious regions, which we shall never see. Chanso. Why have not we an immortal soul? Asked the little mermaid mournfully. I would give gladly all the hundreds of years that I have to live to be a human being only for one day, and to have the hope of knowing the happiness of that glorious world above the stars. You must not think of that, said the old woman. We feel ourselves to be much happier and much better off than human beings. So I shall die, said the little mermaid, and as the foam of the sea, I shall be driven about never again to hear the music of the waves, or to see the pretty flowers, nor the red sun. Is there anything I can do to win an immortal soul? No, said the old woman, unless a man were to love you so much that you were more to him than his father or mother, and if all his thoughts and all his love were fixed upon you, and the priest placed his right hand in yours, and he promised to be true to you, here and hereafter, then his soul would glide into your body, and you would obtain a share in the future happiness of mankind. He would give a soul to you and retain his own as well. But this can never happen. Your fish's tail, which amongst us is considered so beautiful, is thought on earth to be quite ugly. They do not know any better, and they think it necessary to have two stout props, which they call legs, in order to be handsome. Then the little mermaid sighed and looked sorrowfully at her fish's tail. Let us be happy, said the old lady, and dart and spring about during the 300 years that we have to live, which is really quite long enough. After that, we can rest ourselves all the better. This evening, we are going to have a court ball. It is one of those splendid sights which we can never see on earth. The walls and the ceiling of the large ballroom were of thick but transparent crystal. May hundreds of colossal shells, some of a deep red, others of a grass green, stood on each side in rows with blue fire in them, which lighted up the whole saloon and shone through the walls, so that the sea was also illuminated. Innumerable fishes, great and small, swam past the crystal walls. On some of them, the scales glowed with a purple brilliancy, and on others, they shone like silver and gold. Through the halls flowed a broad stream, and in it danced the mermen and the mermaids to the music of their own sweet singing. No one on earth has such a lovely voice as theirs. The little mermaid sang more sweetly than them all. The whole court applauded her with hands and tails, and for a moment her heart felt quite gay, for she knew she had the loveliest voice of any on earth or in the sea. But she soon thought again of the world above her, for she could not forget the charming prince, nor her sorrow that she had not an immortal soul like his. Therefore, she crept away silently out of her father's palace, and while everything within was gladness and song, she sat in her own little garden, sorrowful and alone. Then she heard the bugle sounding through the water, and thought, "He is certainly sailing above he, on whom my wishes depend, and in whose hands I should like to place the happiness of my life. I will venture all for him, and to win an immortal soul, while my sisters are dancing in my father's palace, I will go to the sea witch, of whom I have always been so much afraid. But she can give me counsel and help." And then the little mermaid went out from her garden and took the road to the foaming whirlpools behind which the sorceress lived. She had never been that way before. Neither flowers nor grass grew there. Nothing but bare, gray, sandy ground stretched out to the whirlpool, where the water, like foaming mill wheels, whirled round everything that it seized and cast it into the fathomless deep. Through the midst of these crushing whirlpools, the little mermaid was obliged to pass to reach the dominions of the sea witch. And also, for a long distance, the only road lay right across a quantity of warm, bubbling mire, called by the witch her turf moor. Beyond this stood her house in the center of a strange forest, in which all the trees and flowers were polypi, half animals and half plants. They looked like serpents with 100 heads growing out of the ground. The branches were long, slimy arms with fingers like flexible worms moving limb after limb from the root to the top. All that could be reached in the sea they seized upon and held fast so that it never escaped from their clutches. The little mermaid was so alarmed at what she saw that she stood still, and her heart beat with fear and she was very nearly turning back. But she thought of the prince and of the human soul for which she longed, and her courage returned. She fastened her long flowing hair round her head so that the polypi might not seize hold of it. She laid her hands together across her bosom, and then she darted forward as a fish shoots through the water between the supple arms and fingers of the ugly polypi which were stretched out on each side of her. She saw that each held in its grasp something it had seized with its numerous little arms, as if they were iron bands, the white skeletons of human beings who had perished at sea and had sunk down into the deep waters, skeletons of land animals, oars, rudders, and chests of ships were lying tightly grasped by their clinging arms. Even a little mermaid, whom they had caught and strangled. And this seemed the most shocking of all to the little princess. She now came to a space of marshy ground in the wood, where large, fat water snakes were rolling in the mire and showing their ugly, drab-colored bodies. In the midst of this spot stood a house built with the bones of shipwrecked human beings. There sat the sea witch, allowing a toad to eat from her mouth, just as people sometimes feed a canary with a piece of sugar. She called the ugly water snakes her little chickens, and allowed them to crawl all over her bosom. "I know what you want," said the sea witch. "It is very stupid of you, but you shall have your way, and it will bring you to sorrow, my pretty princess. You want to get rid of your fish's tail, and to have 2 supports instead of it, like human beings on earth, so that the young prince may fall in love with you, and that you may have an immortal soul." And then the witch laughed so loud and disgustingly that the toad and the snakes fell to the ground and lay there wriggling about. "You are but just in time," said the witch, "for after sunrise tomorrow I should not be able to help you till the end of another year. I will prepare a draft for you, with which you must swim to land tomorrow before sunrise, and sit down on the shore and drink it. Your tail will then disappear and shrink up into what mankind calls legs, and you will feel great pain, as if a sword were passing through you. But all who see you will say that you are the prettiest little human being they ever saw. You will still have the same floating gracefulness of movement, and no dancer will ever tread so lightly. But at every step you take, it will feel as if you were treading upon sharp knives, and that the blood must flow. If you will bear all this, I will help you." "Yes, I will," said the little princess in a trembling voice, as she thought of the prince and the immortal soul. "But think again," said the witch, "for when once your shape has become like a human being, you can no more be a mermaid. You will never return through the water to your sisters or to your father's palace again. And if you do not win the love of the prince so that he is willing to forget his father and mother for your sake, and to love you with his whole soul, and allow the priest to join your hands, that you may be man and wife, then you will never have an immortal soul. The first morning after he marries another, your heart will break, and you will become foam on the crest of the waves." "I will do it," said the little mermaid, and she became pale as death. "But I must be paid also," said the witch, "and it is not a trifle that I ask. You have the sweetest voice of any who dwell here in the depths of the sea, and you believe that you will be able to charm the prince with it also. But this voice you must give to me. The best thing you possess will I have for the price of my draft. My own blood must be mixed with it, that it may be as sharp as a two-edged sword. But if you take away my voice," said the little mermaid, "what is left for me? Your beautiful form, your graceful walk, and your expressive eyes. Surely with these you can enchain a man's heart. Well, have you lost your courage? Put out your little tongue that I may cut it off as my payment. Then you shall have the powerful draft." "It shall be," said the little mermaid. Then the witch placed her cauldron on the fire to prepare the magic draft. "Cleanliness is a good thing," said she, scouring the vessel with snakes which she had tied together in a large knot. Then she pricked herself in the breast and let the black blood drop into it. The steam that rose formed itself into such horrible shapes that no one could look at them without fear. Every moment, the witch threw something else into the vessel, and when it began to boil, the sound was like the weeping of a crocodile. When at last the magic draft was ready, it looked like the clearest water. "There it is for you," said the witch. Then she cut off the mermaid's tongue so that she became dumb and would never again speak or sing. "If the polypi should seize hold of you as you return through the wood," said the witch, "throw over them a few drops of the potion, and their fingers will be torn into 1,000 pieces." But the little mermaid had no occasion to do this, for the polypi sprang back in terror when they caught sight of the glittering draft, which shone in her hand like a twinkling star. So she passed quickly through the wood and the marsh and between the rushing whirlpools. She saw that in her father's palace, the torches in the ballroom were extinguished and all within asleep. But she did not venture to go into them, for now she was dumb and going to leave them forever. She felt as if her heart would break. She stole into the garden, took a flower from the flower beds of each of her sisters, kissed her hand 1,000 times towards the palace, and then rose up through the dark blue waters. The sun had not risen when she came in sight of the prince's palace and approached the beautiful marble steps. But the moon shone clear and bright. Then the little mermaid drank the magic draught, and it seemed as if a two-edged sword went through her delicate body. She fell into a swoon and lay like one dead. When the sun arose and shone over the sea, she recovered and felt a sharp pain. But just before her stood the handsome young prince. He fixed his coal-black eyes upon her so earnestly that she cast down her own, and then became aware that her fish's tail was gone, and that she had as pretty a pair of white legs and tiny feet as any little maiden could have. But she had no clothes, so she wrapped herself in her long, thick hair. The prince asked her who she was and where she came from, and she looked at him mildly and sorrowfully with her deep blue eyes. But she could not speak. Every step she took was as the witch had said it would be. She felt as if treading upon the points of needles or sharp knives, but she bore it willingly and stepped as lightly by the prince's side as a soap bubble, so that he and all who saw her wondered at her graceful swaying movements. She was very soon arrayed in costly robes of silk and muslin, and was the most beautiful creature in the palace. But she was dumb and could neither speak nor sing. Beautiful female slaves dressed in silk and gold stepped forward and sang before the prince and his royal parents. One sang better than all the others, and the prince clapped his hands and smiled at her. This was great sorrow to the little mermaid. She knew how much more sweetly she herself could sing once, and she thought, "Oh, if he could only know that I have given away my voice forever to be with him." The slaves next performed some pretty fairy-like dances to the sound of beautiful music. Then the little mermaid raised her lovely white arms, stood on the tips of her toes, and glided over the floor and danced as no one yet had been able to dance. At each moment, her beauty became more revealed, and her expressive eyes appealed more directly to the heart than the songs of the slaves. Everyone was enchanted, especially the prince, who called her his little foundling. And she danced again quite readily to please him, though each time her foot touched the floor, it seemed as if she trod on sharp knives. The prince said she should remain with him always, and she received permission to sleep at his door on a velvet cushion. He had a page's dress made for her that she might accompany him on horseback. They rode together through the sweet scented woods where the green boughs touched their shoulders, and the little birds sang among the fresh leaves. She climbed with the prince to the tops of high mountains, and although her tender feet bled so that even her steps were marked, she only laughed and followed him till they could see the clouds beneath them, looking like a flock of birds traveling to distant lands. While at the prince's palace, and when all the household were asleep, she would go and sit on the broad marble steps, for it eased her burning feet to bathe them in the cold seawater. And then she thought of all those below in the deep. Once, during the night, her sisters came up, arm in arm, singing sorrowfully as they floated on the water. She beckoned to them, and then they recognized her and told her how she had grieved them. After that, they came to the same place every night. And once she saw in the distance her old grandmother, who had not been to the surface of the sea for many years, and the old sea king, her father, with his crown on his head. They stretched out their hands towards her, but they did not venture so near the land as her sisters did. As the days passed, she loved the prince more fondly, and he loved her as he would love a little child. But it never came into his head to make her his wife. Yet unless he married her, she could not receive an immortal soul. And on the morning after his marriage with another, she would dissolve into the foam of the sea. Do you not love me, the best of them all? The eyes of the little mermaid seemed to say, when he took her in his arms and kissed her fair forehead, "Yes, you are dear to me," said the prince, "for you have the best heart, and you are the most devoted to me. You are like a young maiden whom I once saw, but whom I shall never meet again. I was in a ship that was wrecked, and the waves cast me ashore near a holy temple where several young maidens performed the service. The youngest of them found me on the shore and saved my life. I saw her but twice, and she is the only one in the world whom I could love. But you are like her, and you have almost driven her image out of my mind. She belongs to the holy temple, and my good fortune has sent you to me instead of her, and we will never part. Ah, he knows not that it was I who saved his life, thought the little mermaid. I carried him over the sea to the wood where the temple stands. I sat beneath the foam and watched till the human beings came to help him. I saw the pretty maiden that he loves better than he loves me. And the mermaid sighed deeply, but she could not shed tears. He says the maiden belongs to the holy temple, therefore she will never return to the world. They will meet no more while I am by his side and see him every day. I will take care of him and love him and give up my life for his sake. But very soon it was said that the prince must marry, and that the beautiful daughter of a neighboring king would be his wife, for a fine ship was being fitted out. Although the prince gave out that he merely intended to pay a visit to the king, it was generally supposed that he really went to see his daughter. A great company were to go with him. The little mermaid smiled and shook her head. She knew the prince's thoughts better than any of the others. I must travel, he had said to her. I must see this beautiful princess. My parents desire it, but they will not oblige me to bring her home as my bride. I cannot love her. She is not like the beautiful maiden in the temple whom you resemble. If I were forced to choose a bride, I would rather choose you, my dumb foundling with those expressive eyes. And then he kissed her rosy mouth, played with her long, waving hair, and laid his head on her heart while she dreamed of human happiness and an immortal soul. You are not afraid of the sea, my dumb child, said he, as they stood on the deck of the noble ship, which was to carry them to the country of the neighboring king. And then he told her of storm and of calm, of strange fishes in the deep beneath them, and of what the divers had seen there. And she smiled at his descriptions, for she knew better than anyone what wonders were at the bottom of the sea. In the moonlight, when all on board were asleep, excepting the man at the helm who was steering, she sat on the deck, gazing down through the clear water. She thought she could distinguish her father's castle, and upon it her aged grandmother, with the silver crown on her head, looking through the rushing tide at the keel of the vessel. Then her sisters came up on the waves and gazed at her mournfully, wringing their white hands. She beckoned to them and smiled, and wanted to tell them how happy and well off she was. But the cabin boy approached, and when her sisters dived down, he thought it was only the foam of the sea which he saw. The next morning, the ship sailed into the harbor of a beautiful town belonging to the king whom the prince was going to visit. The church bells were ringing, and from the high towers sounded a flourish of trumpets, and soldiers with flying colors and glittering bayonets lined the rocks through which they passed. Every day was a festival. Balls and entertainments followed one another. But the princess had not yet appeared. People said that she was being brought up and educated in a religious house where she was learning every royal virtue. At last she came. Then the little mermaid, who was very anxious to see whether she was really beautiful, was obliged to acknowledge that she had never seen a more perfect vision of beauty. Her skin was delicately fair, and beneath her long, dark eyelashes, her laughing blue eyes shone with truth and purity. "It was you," said the prince, "who saved my life when I lay dead on the beach," and he folded his blushing bride in his arms. "Oh, I am too happy," said he to the little mermaid. "My fondest hopes are all fulfilled. You will rejoice at my happiness, for your devotion to me is great and sincere." The little mermaid kissed his hand and felt as if her heart were already broken. His wedding morning would bring death to her, and she would change into the foam of the sea. All the church bells rung, and the heralds rode about the town proclaiming the betrothal. Perfumed oil was burning in costly silver lamps on every altar. The priests waved the censers, while the bride and bridegroom joined their hands and received the blessing of the bishop. The little mermaid, dressed in silk and gold, held up the bride's train, but her ears heard nothing of the festive music, and her eyes saw not the holy ceremony. She thought of the night of death which was coming to her, and of all she had lost in the world. On the same evening, the bride and bridegroom went on board ship. Cannons were roaring, flags waving, and in the center of the ship, a costly tent of purple and gold had been erected. It contained elegant couches for the reception of the bridal pair during the night. The ship, with swelling sails and a favorable wind, glided away smoothly and lightly over the calm sea. When it grew dark, a number of colored lamps were lit, and the sailors danced merrily on the deck. The little mermaid could not help thinking of her first rising out of the sea when she had seen similar festivities and joys. And she joined in the dance, poised herself in the air as a swallow when he pursues his prey, and all present cheered her with wonder. She had never danced so elegantly before. Her tender feet felt as if cut with sharp knives, but she cared not for it. A sharper pang had pierced through her heart. She knew this was the last evening she should ever see the prince, for whom she had forsaken her kindred and her home. She had given up her beautiful voice and suffered unheard of pain daily for him. while he knew nothing of it. This was the last evening that she would breathe the same air with him, or gaze on the starry sky and the deep sea. An eternal night without a thought or a dream awaited her. She had no soul, and now she could never win one. All was joy and gaiety on board ship till long after midnight. She laughed and danced with the rest, while the thoughts of death were in her heart. The prince kissed his beautiful bride while she played with his raven hair, till they went arm in arm to rest in the splendid tent. Then all became still on board the ship. The helmsman alone awake stood at the helm. The little mermaid leaned her white arms on the edge of the vessel and looked towards the east for the first blush of morning, for that first ray of dawn that would bring her death. She saw her sisters rising out of the flood. They were as pale as herself, but their long, beautiful hair waved no more in the wind and had been cut off. "We have given our hair to the witch," said they, "to obtain help for you, that you may not die tonight. She has given us a knife. Here it is. See, it is very sharp. Before the sun rises, you must plunge it into the heart of the prince. When the warm blood falls upon your feet, they will grow together again and form into a fish's tail, and you will be once more a mermaid, and return to us to live out your 300 years before you die and change into the salt sea foam. Haste, then. He or you must die before sunrise. Our old grandmother moans so for you that her white hair is falling off from sorrow as ours fell under the witch's scissors. Kill the prince and come back. Hasten, do you not see the first red streaks in the sky? In a few minutes, the sun will rise, and you must die." And then they sighed deeply and mournfully and sank down beneath the waves. The little mermaid drew back the crimson curtain of the tent and beheld the fair bride with her head resting on the prince's breast. She bent down and kissed his fair brow, then looked at the sky, on which the rosy dawn grew brighter and brighter. Then she glanced at the sharp knife and again fixed her eyes on the prince, who whispered the name of his bride in his dreams. She was in his thoughts, and the knife trembled in the hand of the little mermaid. Then she flung it far away from her into the waves. The water turned red where it fell, and the drops that spurted up looked like blood. She cast one more lingering, half-fainting glance at the prince, and then threw herself from the ship into the sea, and thought her body was dissolving into foam. The sun rose above the waves, and his warm rays fell on the cold foam of the little mermaid, who did not feel as if she were dying. She saw the bright sun, and all around her floated hundreds of transparent, beautiful beings. She could see through them the white sails of the ship and the red clouds in the sky. Their speech was melodious, but too ethereal to be heard by mortal ears, as they were also unseen by mortal eyes. The little mermaid perceived that she had a body like theirs, and that she continued to rise higher and higher out of the foam. "Where am I?" asked she, and her voice sounded ethereal as the voice of those who were with her. No earthly music could imitate it. "Among the daughters of the air," answered one of them. "A mermaid has not an immortal soul, nor can she obtain one unless she wins the love of a human being. On the power of another hangs her eternal destiny. But the daughters of the air, although they do not possess an immortal soul, can by their good deeds procure one for themselves. We fly to warm countries and cool the sultry air that destroys mankind with the pestilence. We carry the perfume of the flowers to spread health and restoration. After we have striven for 300 years to all the good in our power, we receive an immortal soul and take part in the happiness of mankind. You poor little mermaid, have tried with your whole heart to do as we are doing. You have suffered and endured and raised yourself to the spirit world by your good deeds. And now, by striving for 300 years in the same way, you may obtain an immortal soul." The little mermaid lifted her glorified eyes towards the sun and felt them, for the first time, filling with tears. On the ship in which she had left the prince, there were life and noise. She saw him and his beautiful bride searching for her. Sorrowfully, they gazed at the pearly foam, as if they knew she had thrown herself into the waves. Unseen, she kissed the forehead of her bride and fanned the prince, and then mounted with the other children of the air to a rosy cloud that floated through the ether. After 300 years, thus shall we float into the kingdom of heaven, said she. And we may even get there sooner, whispered one of her companions. Unseen, we can enter the houses of men where there are children, and for every day on which we find a good child who is the joy of his parents and deserves their love, our time of probation is shortened. The child does not know when we fly through the room that we smile with joy at his good conduct, for we can count 1 year less of our 300 years. But when we see a naughty or a wicked child, we shed tears of sorrow, and for every tear a day is added to our time of trial. The Garden of Paradise. There was once a king's son who had a larger and more beautiful collection of books than anyone else in the world, and full of splendid copperplate engravings. He could read and obtain information respecting every people of every land, but not a word could he find to explain the situation of the Garden of Paradise. And this was just what he most wished to know. His grandmother had told him when he was quite a little boy, just old enough to go to school, that each flower in the Garden of Paradise was a sweet cake, that the pistils were full of rich wine, that on one flower history was written, on another geography or tables. So those who wished to learn their lessons had only to eat some of the cakes, and the more they ate, the more history, geography, or tables they knew. He believed it all then. But as he grew older and learnt more and more, he became wise enough to understand that the splendor of the Garden of Paradise must be very different to all this. Oh, why did Eve pluck the fruit from the tree of knowledge? Why did Adam eat the forbidden fruit? Thought the king's son. If I had been there, it would never have happened, and there would have been no sin in the world. The Garden of Paradise occupied all his thoughts till he reached his 17th year. One day, he was walking alone in the wood, which was his greatest pleasure, when evening came on. The clouds gathered, and the rain poured down, as if the sky had been a waterspout. And it was as dark as the bottom of a well at midnight. Sometimes he slipped over the smooth grass or fell over stones that projected out of the rocky ground. Everything was dripping with moisture, and the poor prince had not a dry thread about him. He was obliged at last to climb over great blocks of stone, with water spurting from the thick moss. He began to feel quite faint when he heard a most singular rushing noise, and saw before him a large cave from which came a blaze of light. In the middle of the cave, an immense fire was burning, and a noble stag with its branching horns was placed on a spit between the trunks of 2 pine trees. It was turning slowly before the fire, and an elderly woman as large and strong as if she had been a man in disguise sat by, throwing one piece of wood after another into the flames. "Come in," she said to the prince. "Sit down by the fire and dry yourself." "There is a great draught here," said the prince, as he seated himself on the ground. "It will be worse when my sons come home," replied the woman. "You are now in the cavern of the winds, and my sons are the 4 winds of heaven. Can you understand that?" "Where are your sons?" asked the prince. "It is difficult to answer stupid questions," said the woman. My sons have plenty of business on hand. They are playing at shuttlecock with the clouds up yonder in the king's hall." And she pointed upwards. "Oh, indeed," said the prince, "but you speak more roughly and harshly, and are not so gentle as the women I am used to." "Yes, that is because they have nothing else to do. But I am obliged to be harsh to keep my boys in order, and I can do it, although they are so headstrong. Do you see those 4 sacks hanging on the wall? Well, they are just as much afraid of those sacks as you used to be, of the rat behind the looking-glass. I can bend the boys together and put them in the sacks without any resistance on their parts. I can tell you. There they stay and dare not attempt to come out until I allow them to do so. And here comes one of them. It was the north wind who came in bringing with him a cold, piercing blast. Large hailstones rattled on the floor, and snowflakes were scattered around in all directions. He wore a bearskin dress and cloak. His sealskin cap was drawn over his ears. Long icicles hung from his beard, and one hailstone after another rolled from the collar of his jacket. "Don't go too near the fire," said the prince, "or your hands and face will be frostbitten." "Frostbitten," said the north wind with a loud laugh. "Why, frost is my greatest delight. What sort of a little snip are you? And how did you find your way to the cavern of the winds?" "He is my guest," said the old woman, "and if you are not satisfied with that explanation, you can go into the sack. Do you understand me?" That settled the matter. So the north wind began to relate his adventures, whence he came and where he had been for a whole month. "I come from the polar seas," he said. "I have been on the Bear's Island with the Russian walrus hunters. I sat and slept at the helm of their ship as they sailed away from North Cape. Sometimes when I woke, the storm birds would fly about my legs. They are curious birds. They give one flap with their wings, and then, on their outstretched pinions, soar far away. Duh. Don't make such a long story of it," said the mother of the winds. "What sort of a place is Bear's Island?" "A very beautiful place with a floor for dancing as smooth and flat as a plate. Half-melted snow, partly covered with moss, sharp stones, and skeletons of walruses and polar bears lie all about their gigantic limbs in a state of green decay. It would seem as if the sun never shone there. I blew gently to clear away the mist, and then I saw a little hut which had been built from the wood of a wreck and was covered with the skins of the walrus, the fleshy side outwards. It looked green and red, and on the roof sat a growling bear. Then I went to the seashore to look after birds' nests and saw the unfledged nestlings opening their mouths and screaming for food. I blew into the 1,000 little throats and quickly stopped their screaming. Farther on were the walruses with pigs' heads and teeth a yard long, rolling about like great worms. "You relate your adventures very well, my son," said the mother. "It makes my mouth water to hear you." "After that," continued the north wind, "the hunting commenced. The harpoon was flung into the breast of the walrus so that a smoking stream of blood spurted forth like a fountain and besprinkled the ice. Then I thought of my own game. I began to blow and set my own ships, the great icebergs, sailing so that they might crush the boats. Oh, how the sailors howled and cried out, but I howled louder than they. They were obliged to unload their cargo and throw their chests and the dead walruses on the ice. Then I sprinkled snow over them and left them in their crushed boats to drift southward and to taste salt water. They will never return to Bear's Island. "So you have done mischief," said the mother of the winds. "I shall leave others to tell the good I have done," he replied. "But here comes my brother from the west. I like him best of all, for he has the smell of the sea about him and brings in a cold, fresh air as he enters." "Is that the little Zephyr?" asked the prince. "Yes, it is the little Zephyr," said the old woman. "But he is not little now. In years gone by, he was a beautiful boy. Now that is all past. He came in looking like a wild man, and he wore a slouched hat to protect his head from injury. In his hand, he carried a club cut from a mahogany tree in the American forests, not a trifle to carry." "Whence do you come?" asked the mother. "I come from the wilds of the forests, where the thorny brambles form thick hedges between the trees, where the water snake lies in the wet grass, and mankind seem to be unknown." "What were you doing there?" "I looked into the deep river and saw it rushing down from the rocks. The water drops mounted to the clouds and glittered in the rainbow. I saw the wild buffalo swimming in the river, but the strong tide carried him away amidst a flock of wild ducks which flew into the air as the waters dashed onwards, leaving the buffalo to be hurled over the waterfall. This pleased me, so I raised a storm which rooted up old trees and sent them floating down the river." "And what else have you done?" asked the old woman. "I have rushed wildly across the savannas. I have stroked the wild horses and shaken the cocoa nuts from the trees. Yes, I have many stories to relate, but I need not tell everything I know. You know it all very well, don't you, old lady? and he kissed his mother so roughly that she nearly fell backwards. Oh, he was indeed a wild fellow. Now in came the south wind with a turban and a flowing Bedouin cloak. "How cold it is here," said he, throwing more wood on the fire. "It is easy to feel that the north wind has arrived here before me. Why, it is hot enough here to roast a bear," said the north wind. "You are a bear yourself," said the other. "Do you want to be put in the sack, both of you?" said the old woman. "Sit down now on that stone yonder, and tell me where you have been." "In Africa, mother, I went out with the Hottentots, who were lion hunting in the Kaffir land, where the plains are covered with grass, the color of a green olive. And here I ran races with the ostrich, but I soon outstripped him in swiftness. At last I came to the desert, in which lie the golden sands, looking like the bottom of the sea. Here I met a caravan, and the travelers had just killed their last camel to obtain water. There was very little for them, and they continued their painful journey beneath the burning sun and over the hot sands, which stretched before them, a vast, boundless desert. Then I rolled myself in the loose sand and whirled it in burning columns over their heads. The dromedaries stood still in terror, while the merchants drew their caftans over their heads and threw themselves on the ground before me, as they do before Allah their God. Then I buried them beneath a pyramid of sand which covers them all. When I blow that away on my next visit, the sun will bleach their bones, and travelers will see that others have been there before them. Otherwise, in such a wild desert, they might not believe it possible. So you have done nothing but evil, said the mother. Into the sack with you. And before he was aware, she had seized the south wind round the body and popped him into the bag. He rolled about on the floor till she sat herself upon him to keep him still. These boys of yours are very lively, said the prince. Yes, she replied, but I know how to correct them when necessary. And here comes the fourth. In came the east wind, dressed like a Chinese. Oh, you come from that quarter, do you? Said she. I thought you had been to the Garden of Paradise. I am going there tomorrow, he replied. I have not been there for 100 years. I have just come from China, where I danced round the porcelain tower till all the bells jingled again. In the streets, an official flogging was taking place, and bamboo canes were being broken on the shoulders of men of every high position, from the 1st to the 9th grade. They cried, "Many thanks, my fatherly benefactor." But I am sure the words did not come from their hearts, so I rang the bells till they sounded ding, ding, dong. You are a wild boy," said the old woman. "It is well for you that you are going tomorrow to the Garden of Paradise. You always get improved in your education there. Drink deeply from the fountain of wisdom while you are there, and bring home a bottleful for me." "That I will," said the east wind. "But why have you put my brother South in a bag? Let him out, for I want him to tell me about the phoenix bird. The princess always wants to hear of this bird when I pay her my visit every 100 years. If you will open the sack, sweetest mother, I will give you 2 pocketfuls of tea, green and fresh as when I gathered it from the spot where it grew. Well, for the sake of the tea, and because you are my own boy, I will open the bag." She did so, and the south wind crept out, looking quite cast down, because the prince had seen his disgrace. "There is a palm leaf for the princess," he said. "The old phoenix, the only one in the world, gave it to me himself. He has scratched on it with his beak the whole of his history during the 100 years he has lived. She can there read how the old phoenix set fire to his own nest and sat upon it while it was burning like a Hindu widow. The dry twigs around the nest crackled and smoked till the flames burst forth and consumed the phoenix to ashes. Amidst the fire lay an egg red hot, which presently burst with a loud report, and out flew a young bird. He is the only phoenix in the world, and the king over all the other birds. He has bitten a hole in the leaf which I give you, and that is his greeting to the princess. Now, let us have something to eat," said the mother of the winds. So they all sat down to feast on the roasted stag, and as the prince sat by the side of the east wind, they soon became good friends. "Pray tell me," said the prince, "who is that princess of whom you have been talking, and where lies the Garden of Paradise?" "Ho, ho," said the east wind. "Would you like to go there? Well, you can fly off with me tomorrow. But I must tell you one thing. No human being has been there since the time of Adam and Eve. I suppose you have read of them in your Bible?" "Of course I have," said the prince. "Well," continued the east wind, "when they were driven out of the Garden of Paradise, it sunk into the earth, but it retained its warm sunshine, its balmy air, and all its splendor. The fairy queen lives there, in the island of happiness, where death never comes, and all is beautiful. I can manage to take you there tomorrow, if you will sit on my back. But now don't talk any more, for I want to go to sleep." And then they all slept. When the prince awoke in the early morning, he was not a little surprised at finding himself high up above the clouds. He was seated on the back of the east wind, who held him faithfully. And they were so high in the air that woods and fields, rivers and lakes, as they lay beneath them, looked like a painted map. "Good morning," said the east wind. "You might have slept on a while, for there is very little to see in the flat country over which we are passing, unless you like to count the churches. They look like spots of chalk on a green board." The green board was the name he gave to the green fields and meadows. "It was very rude of me not to say goodbye to your mother and your brothers," said the prince. "They will excuse you as you were asleep," said the east wind. And then they flew on faster than ever. The leaves and branches of the trees rustled as they passed. When they flew over seas and lakes, the waves rose higher, and the large ships dipped into the water like diving swans. As darkness came on towards evening, the great towns looked charming. Lights were sparkling now, seen now hidden, just as the sparks go out, one after another, on a piece of burnt paper. The prince clapped his hands with pleasure, but the east wind advised him not to express his admiration in that manner, or he might fall down and find himself hanging on a church steeple. The eagle in the dark forests flies swiftly, but faster than he flew the east wind. The Cossack, on his small horse, rides lightly over the plains, but lighter still past the prince on the winds of the wind. There are the Himalayas, the highest mountains in Asia, said the east wind. We shall soon reach the garden of paradise now. Then they turned southward, and the air became fragrant with the perfume of spices and flowers. Here, figs and pomegranates grew wild, and the vines were covered with clusters of blue and purple grapes. Here they both descended to the earth and stretched themselves on the soft grass, while the flowers bowed to the breath of the wind as if to welcome it. Are we now in the garden of paradise? Asked the prince. No, indeed, replied the east wind, but we shall be there very soon. Do you see that wall of rocks and the cavern beneath it, over which the grapevines hang like a green curtain? Through that cavern we must pass. Wrap your cloak round you, for while the sun scorches you here, a few steps farther, it will be icy cold. The bird flying past the entrance to the cavern feels as if one wing were in the region of summer and the other in the depths of winter. So this, then, is the way to the garden of paradise? Asked the prince as they entered the cavern. It was indeed cold, but the cold soon passed, for the east wind spread his wings, and they gleamed like the brightest fire. As they passed on through this wonderful cave, the prince could see great blocks of stone from which water trickled, hanging over their heads in fantastic shapes. Sometimes it was so narrow that they had to creep on their hands and knees, while at other times it was lofty and wide, like the free air. It had the appearance of a chapel for the dead, with petrified organs and silent pipes. We seem to be passing through the valley of death to the garden of paradise, said the prince. But the east wind answered not a word, only pointed forwards to a lovely blue light which gleamed in the distance. The blocks of stone assumed a misty appearance, till at last they looked like white clouds in moonlight. The air was fresh and balmy, like a breeze from the mountains, perfumed with flowers from a valley of roses. A river clear as the air itself sparkled at their feet, while in its clear depths could be seen gold and silver, fish sporting in the bright water, and purple eels emitting sparks of fire at every moment, while the broad leaves of the water lilies that floated on its surface flickered with all the colors of the rainbow. The flower, in its color of flame, seemed to receive its nourishment from the water, as a lamp is sustained by oil. A marble bridge of such exquisite workmanship that it appeared as if formed of lace and pearls, led to the island of happiness, in which bloomed the garden of paradise. The east wind took the prince in his arms and carried him over, while the flowers and the leaves sang the sweet songs of his childhood in tones so full and soft that no human voice could venture to imitate. Within the garden grew large trees full of sap, but whether they were palm trees or gigantic water plants, the prince knew not. The climbing plants hung in garlands of green and gold, like the illuminations on the margins of old missals, or twined among the initial letters. Birds, flowers, and festoons appeared intermingled in seeming confusion. Close by on the grass stood a group of peacocks with radiant tails outspread to the sun. The prince touched them and found to his surprise that they were not really birds, but the leaves of the burdock tree, which shone with the colors of a peacock's tail. The lion and the tiger, gentle and tame, were springing about like playful cats among the green bushes, whose perfume was like the fragrant blossom of the olive. The plumage of the wood pigeon glistened like pearls as it struck the lion's mane with its wings, while the antelope, usually so shy, stood near, nodding its head as if it wished to join in the frolic. The fairy of paradise next made her appearance. Her raiment shone like the sun, and her serene countenance beamed with happiness, like that of a mother rejoicing over her child. She was young and beautiful, and a train of lovely maidens followed her, each wearing a bright star in her hair. The east wind gave her the palm leaf on which was written the history of the phoenix, and her eyes sparkled with joy. She then took the prince by the hand and led him into her palace, the walls of which were richly colored, like a tulip leaf when it is turned to the sun. The roof had the appearance of an inverted flower, and the colors grew deeper and brighter to the gazer. The prince walked to a window and saw what appeared to be the tree of knowledge of good and evil, with Adam and Eve standing by and the serpent near them. "I thought they were banished from paradise," he said. The princess smiled and told him that time had engraved each event on a window pane in the form of a picture. But unlike other pictures, all that it represented lived and moved. The leaves rustled, and the persons went and came as in a looking glass. He looked through another pane and saw the ladder in Jacob's dream, on which the angels were ascending and descending with outspread wings. All that had ever happened in the world here lived and moved on the panes of glass in pictures such as time alone could produce. The fairy now led the prince into a large, lofty room with transparent walls through which the light shone. Here were portraits, each one appearing more beautiful than the other. Millions of happy beings whose laughter and song mingled in one sweet melody. Some of these were in such an elevated position that they appeared smaller than the smallest rosebud, or like pencil dots on paper. In the center of the hall stood a tree with drooping branches from which hung golden apples, both great and small, looking like oranges amid the green leaves. It was the tree of knowledge of good and evil, from which Adam and Eve had plucked and eaten the forbidden fruit, and from each leaf trickled a bright red dewdrop, as if the tree were weeping tears of blood for their sin. "Let us now take the boat," said the fairy. "A sail on the cool waters will refresh us, but we shall not move from the spot. Although the boat may rock on the swelling water, the countries of the world will glide before us, but we shall remain still." It was indeed wonderful to behold. First came the lofty Alps, snow-clad and covered with clouds and dark pines. The horn resounded, and the shepherds sang merrily in the valleys. The banana trees bent their drooping branches over the boat. Black swans floated on the water, and singular animals and flowers appeared on the distant shore. New Holland, the fifth division of the world, now glided by, with mountains in the background, looking blue in the distance. They heard the song of the priests and saw the wild dance of the savage to the sound of the drums and trumpets of bone. The pyramids of Egypt rising to the clouds, columns and sphinxes overthrown and buried in the sand followed in their turn, while the northern lights flashed out over the extinguished volcanoes of the north in fireworks. none could imitate. The prince was delighted, and yet he saw hundreds of other wonderful things, more than can be described. "Can I stay here forever?" asked he. "That depends upon yourself," replied the fairy. "If you do not, like Adam, long for what is forbidden, you can remain here always." "I should not touch the fruit on the tree of knowledge," said the prince. "There is abundance of fruit equally beautiful." "Examine your own heart," said the princess, "and if you do not feel sure of its strength, return with the east wind who brought you. He is about to fly back and will not return here for 100 years. The time will not seem to you more than 100 hours, yet even that is a long time for temptation and resistance. Every evening when I leave you, I shall be obliged to say, 'Come with me,' and to beckon to you with my hand. But you must not listen, nor move from your place to follow me. For with every step, you will find your power to resist weaker. If once you attempted to follow me, you would soon find yourself in the hall, where grows the tree of knowledge, for I sleep beneath its perfumed branches. If you stooped over me, I should be forced to smile. If you then kissed my lips, the garden of paradise would sink into the earth, and to you it would be lost. A keen wind from the desert would howl around you. Cold rain fall on your head, and sorrow and woe be your future lot. I will remain, said the prince. So the east wind kissed him on the forehead and said, Be firm. Then shall we meet again when 100 years have passed. Farewell, farewell. Then the east wind spread his broad pinions, which shone like the lightning in harvest, or as the northern lights in a cold winter. Farewell, farewell, echoed the trees and the flowers. Storks and pelicans flew after him in feathery bands to accompany him to the boundaries of the garden. Now we will commence dancing, said the fairy. And when it is nearly over at sunset, while I am dancing with you, I shall make a sign and ask you to follow me, but do not obey. I shall be obliged to repeat the same thing for 100 years, and each time when the trial is past, if you resist, you will gain strength till resistance becomes easy, and at last the temptation will be quite overcome. This evening, as it will be the first time I have warned you. After this, the fairy led him into a large hall filled with transparent lilies. The yellow stamina of each flower formed a tiny golden harp, from which came forth strains of music, like the mingled tones of flute and lyre. Beautiful maidens, slender and graceful in form, and robed in transparent gauze, floated through the dance and sang of the happy life in the garden of paradise, where death never entered, and where all would bloom forever in immortal youth. As the sun went down, the whole heavens became crimson and gold, and tinted the lilies with the hue of roses. Then the beautiful maidens offered to the prince sparkling wine, and when he had drank, he felt happiness greater than he had ever known before. Presently, the background of the hall opened, and the tree of knowledge appeared surrounded by a halo of glory that almost blinded him. Voices soft and lovely, as his mother's, sounded in his ears, as if she were singing to him, "My child, my beloved child." Then the fairy beckoned to him and said in sweet accents, "Come with me, come with me." Forgetting his promise, forgetting it even on the very first evening, he rushed towards her, while she continued to beckon to him and to smile. The fragrance around him overpowered his senses. The music from the harps sounded more entrancing, while around the tree appeared millions of smiling faces, nodding and singing. Man should know everything. Man is the Lord of the earth. The tree of knowledge no longer wept tears of blood, for the dewdrops shone like glittering stars. "Come, come," continued that thrilling voice, and the prince followed the call. At every step, his cheeks glowed, and the blood rushed wildly through his veins. "I must follow," he cried. "It is not a sin, it cannot be, to follow beauty and joy. I only want to see her sleep, and nothing will happen unless I kiss her, and that I will not do, for I have strength to resist and a determined will." The fairy threw off her dazzling attire, bent back the boughs, and in another moment was hidden among them. "I have not sinned yet," said the prince, "and I will not." And then he pushed aside the boughs to follow the princess. She was lying already asleep, beautiful as only a fairy in the garden of paradise could be. She smiled as he bent over her, and he saw tears trembling out of her beautiful eyelashes. "Do you weep for me?" he whispered. "Oh, weep not, thou loveliest of women. Now do I begin to understand the happiness of paradise. I feel it to my inmost soul in every thought. A new life is born within me. One moment of such happiness is worth an eternity of darkness and woe." He stooped and kissed the tears from her eyes and touched her lips with his. A clap of thunder, loud and awful, resounded through the trembling air. All around him fell into ruin. The lovely fairy, the beautiful garden, sunk deeper and deeper. The prince saw it sinking down in the dark night till it shone only like a star in the distance beneath him. Then he felt a coldness, like death, creeping over him. His eyes closed, and he became insensible. When he recovered, a chilling rain was beating upon him, and a sharp wind blew on his head. "Alas, what have I done?" he sighed. "I have sinned like Adam, and the garden of paradise has sunk into the earth." He opened his eyes and saw the star in the distance, but it was the morning star in heaven, which glittered in the darkness. Presently, he stood up and found himself in the depths of the forest, close to the cavern of the winds, and the mother of the winds sat by his side. She looked angry and raised her arm in the air as she spoke. "The very first evening," she said. "Well, I expected it. If you were my son, you should go into the sack. And there he will have to go at last," said a strong old man with large black wings and a scythe in his hand, whose name was Death. "He shall be laid in his coffin, but not yet. I will allow him to wander about the world for a while to atone for his sin and to give him time to become better. But I shall return when he least expects me. I shall lay him in a black coffin, place it on my head, and fly away with it beyond the stars. There also blooms a garden of paradise, and if he is good and pious, he will be admitted. But if his thoughts are bad, and his heart is full of sin, he will sink with his coffin deeper than the garden of paradise has sunk. Once in every 1,000 years, I shall go and fetch him, when he will either be condemned to sink still deeper, or be raised to a happier life in the world beyond the stars." Little Claus and Big Claus. In a village, there once lived 2 men who had the same name. They were both called Claus. One of them had 4 horses, but the other had only 1. So to distinguish them, people called the owner of the 4 horses Great Claus, and he who had only 1, Little Claus. Now we shall hear what happened to them, for this is a true story. Through the whole week, Little Claus was obliged to plow for Great Claus and lend him his 1 horse. And once a week, on a Sunday, Great Claus lent him all his 4 horses. Then, how Little Claus would smack his whip over all 5 horses. They were as good as his own on that one day. The sun shone brightly, and the church bells were ringing merrily as the people passed by, dressed in their best clothes, with their prayer books under their arms. They were going to hear the clergyman preach. They looked at Little Claus plowing with his 5 horses, and he was so proud that he smacked his whip and said, "Gee up, my 5 horses." "You must not say that," said Big Claus, "for only one of them belongs to you." But Little Claus soon forgot what he ought to say, and when anyone passed, he would call out, Gee up my 5 horses. Now I must beg you not to say that again, said Big Claus. For if you do, I shall hit your horse on the head so that he will drop dead on the spot, and there will be an end of him. I promise you, I will not say it any more, said the other. But as soon as people came by, nodding to him and wishing him good day, he became so pleased and thought how grand it looked to have 5 horses plowing in his field that he cried out again, "Gee up, all my horses. I'll gee up your horses for you," said Big Claus. And seizing a hammer, he struck the one horse of Little Claus on the head, and he fell dead instantly. "Oh, now I have no horse at all," said Little Claus, weeping. But after a while, he took off the dead horse's skin and hung the hide to dry in the wind. Then he put the dry skin into a bag and, placing it over his shoulder, went out into the next town to sell the horse's skin. He had a very long way to go and had to pass through a dark, gloomy forest. Presently, a storm arose, and he lost his way, and before he discovered the right path, evening came on, and it was still a long way to the town, and too far to return home before night. Near the road stood a large farmhouse. The shutters outside the windows were closed, but lights shone through the crevices at the top. "I might get permission to stay here for the night," thought Little Claus. So he went up to the door and knocked. The farmer's wife opened the door, but when she heard what he wanted, she told him to go away, as her husband would not allow her to admit strangers. "Then I shall be obliged to lie out here," said Little Claus to himself, as the farmer's wife shut the door in his face. Near to the farmhouse stood a large haystack, and between it and the house was a small shed with a thatched roof. "I can lie up there," said Little Claus as he saw the roof. "It will make a famous bed, but I hope the stork will not fly down and bite my legs." For on it stood a living stork, whose nest was in the roof. So Little Claus climbed to the roof of the shed, and while he turned himself to get comfortable, he discovered that the wooden shutters, which were closed, did not reach to the tops of the windows of the farmhouse, so that he could see into a room in which a large table was laid out with wine, roast meat, and a splendid fish. The farmer's wife and the sexton were sitting at the table together, and she filled his glass and helped him plenteously to fish, which appeared to be his favorite dish. "If I could only get some, too," thought Little Claus. And then, as he stretched his neck towards the window, he spied a large, beautiful pie. Indeed, they had a glorious feast before them. At this moment, he heard someone riding down the road towards the farmhouse. It was the farmer returning home. He was a good man, but still, he had a very strange prejudice. He could not bear the sight of a sexton. If one appeared before him, he would put himself in a terrible rage. In consequence of this dislike, the sexton had gone to visit the farmer's wife during her husband's absence from home, and the good woman had placed before him the best she had in the house to eat. When she heard the farmer coming, she was frightened and begged the sexton to hide himself in a large empty chest that stood in the room. He did so, for he knew her husband could not endure the sight of a sexton. The woman then quickly put away the wine and hid all the rest of the nice things in the oven. For if her husband had seen them, he would have asked what they were brought out for. "Oh dear," sighed little Claus from the top of the shed as he saw all the good things disappear. "Is anyone up there?" asked the farmer, looking up and discovering little Claus. "Why are you lying up there? Come down and come into the house with me." So little Claus came down and told the farmer how he had lost his way and begged for a night's lodging. "All right," said the farmer, "but we must have something to eat first." The woman received them both very kindly, laid the cloth on a large table, and placed before them a dish of porridge. The farmer was very hungry and ate his porridge with a good appetite. But little Claus could not help thinking of the nice roast meat fish and pies, which he knew were in the oven. Under the table at his feet lay the sack containing the horse's skin, which he intended to sell at the next town. Now, little Claus did not relish the porridge at all, so he trod with his foot on the sack under the table, and the dry skin squeaked quite loud. "Hush," said little Claus to his sack, at the same time treading upon it again, till it squeaked louder than before. "Hello, what have you got in your sack?" asked the farmer. "Oh, it is a conjurer," said little Claus, "and he says we need not eat porridge, for he has conjured the oven full of roast meat fish and pie." "Wonderful," cried the farmer, starting up and opening the oven door. And there lay all the nice things hidden by the farmer's wife, but which he supposed had been conjured there by the wizard under the table. The woman dared not say anything, so she placed the things before them, and they both ate of the fish, the meat, and the pastry. Then little Claus trod again upon his sack, and it squeaked as before. "What does he say now?" asked the farmer. "He says," replied little Claus, "that there are 3 bottles of wine for us standing in the corner by the oven." So the woman was obliged to bring out the wine also, which she had hidden, and the farmer drank it till he became quite merry. He would have liked such a conjurer as little Claus carried in his sack. "Could he conjure up the evil one?" asked the farmer. "I should like to see him now, while I am so merry." "Oh, yes," replied little Claus. "My conjurer can do anything I ask him. Can you not?" he asked, treading at the same time on the sack till it squeaked. Do you hear? He answers, yes, but he fears that we shall not like to look at him. Oh, I am not afraid. What will he be like? Well, he is very much like a sexton. Ha, said the farmer, then he must be ugly. Do you know I cannot endure the sight of a sexton? However, that doesn't matter. I shall know who it is, so I shall not mind. Now then, I have got up my courage, but don't let him come too near me. Stop, I must ask the conjurer, said little Claus. So he trod on the bag and stooped his ear down to listen. What does he say? He says that you must go and open that large chest which stands in the corner, and you will see the evil one crouching down inside. But you must hold the lid firmly, that he may not slip out. Will you come and help me hold it? Said the farmer, going towards the chest in which his wife had hidden the sexton, who now lay inside, very much frightened. The farmer opened the lid a very little way and peeped in. Oh, cried he, springing backwards, I saw him, and he is exactly like our sexton. How dreadful it is. So after that, he was obliged to drink again, and they sat and drank till far into the night. You must sell your conjurer to me, said the farmer. Ask as much as you like, I will pay it. Indeed, I would give you directly a whole bushel of gold. No, indeed I cannot, said little Claus. Only think how much profit I could make out of this conjurer. So, but I should like to have him, said the fanner, still continuing his entreaties. Well, said little Claus at length, you have been so good as to give me a night's lodging. I will not refuse you. You shall have the conjurer for a bushel of money, but I will have quite full measure. So you shall, said the farmer, but you must take away the chest as well. I would not have it in the house another hour. There is no knowing if he may not be still there. Ta. So little Claus gave the farmer the sack containing the dried horse's skin, and received in exchange a bushel of money full measure. The farmer also gave him a wheelbarrow on which to carry away the chest and the gold. Farewell, said little Claus, as he went off with his money and the great chest in which the sexton lay still concealed. On one side of the forest was a broad, deep river. The water flowed so rapidly that very few were able to swim against the stream. A new bridge had lately been built across it, and in the middle of this bridge, little Claus stopped and said loud enough to be heard by the sexton, Now what shall I do with this stupid chest? It is as heavy as if it were full of stones. I shall be tired if I roll it any farther, so I may as well throw it in the river. If it swims after me to my house, well and good, and if not, it will not much matter." So he seized the chest in his hand and lifted it up a little, as if he were going to throw it into the water. "No, leave it alone," cried the sexton from within the chest. "Let me out first." "Oh," exclaimed little Claus, pretending to be frightened. "He is in there still, is he? I must throw him into the river, that he may be drowned." "Oh no, oh no," cried the sexton. "I will give you a whole bushel full of money if you will let me go, Tom." "Why, that is another matter," said little Claus, opening the chest. The sexton crept out, pushed the empty chest into the water, and went to his house. Then he measured out a whole bushel full of gold for little Claus, who had already received one from the farmer, so that now he had a barrow full. "I have been well paid for my horse," said he to himself, when he reached home, entered his own room, and emptied all his money into a heap on the floor. "How vexed Great Claus will be when he finds out how rich I have become, all through my one horse. But I shall not tell him exactly how it all happened." Then he sent a boy to Great Claus to borrow a bushel measure. "What can he want it for?" thought Great Claus. So he smeared the bottom of the measure with tar, that some of whatever was put into it might stick there and remain. And so it happened. For when the measure returned, 3 new silver florins were sticking to it. "What does this mean?" said Great Claus. So he ran off directly to little Claus and asked, "Where did you get so much money?" "Oh, for my horse's skin, I sold it yesterday." "It was certainly well paid for then," said Great Claus. And he ran home to his house, seized a hatchet, and knocked all his 4 horses on the head, flayed off their skins, and took them to the town to sell. "Skins, skins, who'll buy skins?" he cried as he went through the streets. All the shoemakers and tanners came running and asked how much he wanted for them. "A bushel of money for each," replied Great Claus. "Are you mad?" they all cried. "Do you think we have money to spend by the bushel?" "Skins, skins," he cried again. "Who'll buy skins?" But to all who inquired the price, his answer was, "A bushel of money." "He is making fools of us," said they all. Then the shoemakers took their straps, and the tanners their leather aprons, and began to beat Great Claus. "Skins, skins," they cried, mocking him. "Yes, we'll mark your skin for you till it is black and blue." "Out of the town with him," said they. And Great Claus was obliged to run as fast as he could. He had never before been so thoroughly beaten. "Ah," said he, as he came to his house, "Little Claus shall pay me for this. I will beat him to death. Meanwhile, The old grandmother of little Claus died. She had been cross, unkind, and really spiteful to him. But he was very sorry and took the dead woman and laid her in his warm bed to see if he could bring her to life again. There, he determined that she should lie the whole night while he seated himself in a chair in a corner of the room, as he had often done before. During the night, as he sat there, the door opened, and in came Great Claus with a hatchet. He knew well where little Claus's bed stood, so he went right up to it and struck the old grandmother on the head, thinking it must be little Claus. "There," cried he, "now you cannot make a fool of me again." And then he went home. That is a very wicked man, thought little Claus. He meant to kill me. It is a good thing for my old grandmother that she was already dead, or he would have taken her life. Then he dressed his old grandmother in her best clothes, borrowed a horse of his neighbor, and harnessed it to a cart. Then he placed the old woman on the back seat so that she might not fall out as he drove and rode away through the wood. By sunrise, they reached a large inn where little Claus stopped and went to get something to eat. The landlord was a rich man and a good man too, but as passionate as if he had been made of pepper and snuff. "Good morning," said he to little Claus. "You are come betimes today." "Yes," said little Claus. "I am going to the town with my old grandmother. She is sitting at the back of the wagon, but I cannot bring her into the room. Will you take her a glass of mead, but you must speak very loud, for she cannot hear well." "Yes, certainly I will," replied the landlord, and pouring out a glass of mead, he carried it out to the dead grandmother, who sat upright in the cart. "Here is a glass of mead from your grandson," said the landlord. The dead woman did not answer a word, but sat quite still. "Do you not hear?" cried the landlord as loud as he could. "Here is a glass of mead from your grandson." Again and again he bawled it out, but as she did not stir, he flew into a passion and threw the glass of mead in her face. It struck her on the nose, and she fell backwards out of the cart, for she was only seated there, not tied in. "Hello!" cried little Claus, rushing out of the door and seizing hold of the landlord by the throat. "You have killed my grandmother. See, here is a great hole in her forehead." "Oh, how unfortunate," said the landlord, wringing his hands. "This all comes of my fiery temper. Dear little Claus, I will give you a bushel of money. I will bury your grandmother as if she were my own. Only keep silent, or else they will cut off my head, and that would be disagreeable." So it happened that little Claus received another bushel of money, and the landlord buried his old grandmother as if she had been his own. When little Claus reached home again, he immediately sent a boy to Great Claus, requesting him to lend him a bushel measure. "How is this?" thought Great Claus. "Did I not kill him? I must go and see for myself." So he went to Little Claus and took the bushel measure with him. "How did you get all this money?" asked Great Claus, staring with wide-open eyes at his neighbor's treasures. "You killed my grandmother instead of me," said Little Claus. "So I have sold her for a bushel of money. That is a good price at all events," said Great Claus. So he went home, took a hatchet, and killed his old grandmother with one blow. Then he placed her on a cart and drove into the town to the apothecary and asked him if he would buy a dead body. "Whose is it, and where did you get it?" asked the apothecary. "It is my grandmother," he replied. "I killed her with a blow that I might get a bushel of money for her." "Heaven preserve us," cried the apothecary. "You are out of your mind. Don't say such things, or you will lose your head." And then he talked to him seriously about the wicked deed he had done, and told him that such a wicked man would surely be punished. Great Claus got so frightened that he rushed out of the surgery, jumped into the cart, whipped up his horses, and drove home quickly. The apothecary and all the people thought him mad and let him drive where he liked. "You shall pay for this," said Great Claus as soon as he got into the high road. "That you shall, Little Claus." So as soon as he reached home, he took the largest sack he could find and went over to Little Claus. "You have played me another trick," said he. "First, I killed all my horses, and then my old grandmother, and it is all your fault. But you shall not make a fool of me any more." So he laid hold of Little Claus round the body and pushed him into the sack, which he took on his shoulders, saying, "Now I'm going to drown you in the river." So he had a long way to go before he reached the river, and Little Claus was not a very light weight to carry. The road led by the church, and as they passed, he could hear the organ playing and the people singing beautifully. Great Claus put down the sack close to the church door and thought he might as well go in and hear a psalm before he went any farther. Little Claus could not possibly get out of the sack, and all the people were in church. So in he went. "Oh dear, sighed Little Claus in the sack as he turned and twisted about. But he found he could not loosen the string with which it was tied. Presently, an old cattle driver with snowy hair passed by, carrying a large staff in his hand, with which he drove a large herd of cows and oxen before him. They stumbled against the sack in which lay Little Claus and turned it over. "Oh dear," sighed little Claus. "I am very young, yet I am soon going to heaven." "And I, poor fellow," said the drover, "I who am so old already cannot get there." "Open the sack," cried little Claus. "Creep into it instead of me, and you will soon be there." "With all my heart," replied the drover, opening the sack, from which sprung little Claus as quickly as possible. "Will you take care of my cattle?" said the old man as he crept into the bag. "Yes," said little Claus, and he tied up the sack and then walked off with all the cows and oxen. When Great Claus came out of church, he took up the sack and placed it on his shoulders. It appeared to have become lighter, for the old drover was not half so heavy as little Claus. "How light he seems now," said he. "Ah, it is because I have been to a church." So he walked on to the river, which was deep and broad, and threw the sack containing the old drover into the water, believing it to be little Claus. "There you may lie," he exclaimed. "You will play me no more tricks now." Then he turned to go home, but when he came to a place where two roads crossed, there was little Claus driving the cattle. "How is this?" said Great Claus. "Did I not drown you just now?" "Yes," said little Claus. "You threw me into the river about half an hour ago." "But wherever did you get all these fine beasts?" asked Great Claus. "These beasts are sea cattle," replied little Claus. "I'll tell you the whole story, and thank you for drowning me. I am above you. Now I am really very rich. I was frightened, to be sure, while I lay tied up in the sack, and the wind whistled in my ears when you threw me into the river from the bridge, and I sank to the bottom immediately. But I did not hurt myself, for I fell upon beautifully oft grass, which grows down there, and in a moment the sack opened, and the sweetest little maiden came towards me. She had snow-white robes and a wreath of green leaves on her wet hair. She took me by the hand and said, "So you are come, little Claus, and here are some cattle for you to begin with. About a mile farther on the road, there is another herd for you." Then I saw that the river formed a great highway for the people who live in the sea. They were walking and driving here and there from the sea to the land at the spot where the river terminates. The bed of the river was covered with the loveliest flowers and sweet, fresh grass. The fish swam past me as rapidly as the birds do here in the air. How handsome all the people were, and what fine cattle were grazing on the hills and in the valleys. "But why did you come up again?" said Great Claus. "If it was all so beautiful down there, I should not have done so." "Well," said little Claus, "it was good policy on my part You heard me say just now that I was told by the sea maiden to go a mile farther on the road, and I should find a whole herd of cattle. By the road, she meant the river, for she could not travel any other way. But I knew the winding of the river, and how it bends sometimes to the right and sometimes to the left, and it seemed a long way, so I chose a shorter one. And by coming up to the land, and then driving across the fields back again to the river, I shall save half a mile and get all my cattle more quickly." "What a lucky fellow you are," exclaimed Great Claus. "Do you think I should get any sea cattle if I went down to the bottom of the river?" "Yes, I think so," said Little Claus. "But I cannot carry you there in a sack. You are too heavy. However, if you will go there first, and then creep into a sack, I will throw you in with the greatest pleasure." "Thank you," said Great Claus. "But remember, if I do not get any sea cattle down there, I shall come up again and give you a good thrashing." "No, now, don't be too fierce about it," said Little Claus, as they walked on towards the river. When they approached it, the cattle, who were very thirsty, saw the stream and ran down to drink. "See what a hurry they are in," said Little Claus. "They are longing to get down again." "Come help me make haste," said Great Claus, "or you'll get beaten." So he crept into a large sack which had been lying across the back of one of the oxen. "Put in a stone," said Great Claus, "or I may not sink." "Oh, there's not much fear of that," he replied. Still, he put a large stone into the bag, and then tied it tightly and gave it a push. Plump! In went Great Claus, and immediately sank to the bottom of the river. "I'm afraid he will not find any cattle," said Little Claus, and then he drove his own beasts homewards.